I lay stretched out on the small sofa in my newly rented apartment on the east side of Atlanta, one hand holding a cup of hot tea that had long gone cold, the other resting on my forehead as if trying to shake off the dizziness from an endless flood of text messages. My phone screen blinked incessantly on the coffee table, calls from Mom, Dad, and even Brandon, my older brother. The same three names flashed over and over like a broken record, each notification piercing through the silence like a siren demanding attention. It felt as though one more second of my silence would cause the device to explode under the sheer weight of their desperation. 6 months. 6 whole months since I walked out of that house. No arguments, no tears, not even the dramatic slam of a door. Just me quietly packing a few clothes, my old laptop, and my finance notebook into a faded duffel bag before stepping outside just as the sun dipped behind the buildings across the street. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No one imagined I wouldn't come back. They were used to Diana, the easygoing daughter, the reliable one who always paid the utility bills in a pinch. I was the invisible fixer behind every financial mess in the family, the one who stepped in whenever Brandon lost another job or when Mom and Dad forgot their payment deadlines for some new piece of furniture they didn't need. For nearly a decade, I had been the backbone of this dysfunctional system, a system I never built but somehow became trapped in. A system where I ran tirelessly while everyone else stood still, expecting me to keep moving without question. The phone vibrated again. I didn't need to look at it to know it was Mom. Her voice echoed in my head already, "How could you do this to your family?" Followed by the inevitable guilt trip. "If you still care about us, call back right now." But I didn't pick up. I didn't even reach for the phone. Instead, I leaned my head back, took a deep breath, and let the tension in my chest loosen with every passing second. My name is Diana Miller. I'm 28 years old, a financial analyst who earned a full scholarship to Georgia State University. People often assume success came easily to me because of that scholarship, but what they don't see are the countless nights I spent working double shifts at a pastry shop after school just to afford a second-hand computer so I could keep up with my studies. While my classmates were getting picked up by their parents, I rode my bike 4 blocks to work, wiping tables and mopping floors until late into the evening. When Brandon needed a new MacBook after dropping out of art school, Mom opened a credit card without hesitation, saying he needed it to restart his life. But when I asked for help once, for anything, it was met with silence or excuses. It started innocently enough, a single message from Mom late one night while I was still at the office. "Diana, we just lost power. Your dad forgot to pay this month's bill. Can you help? I'll pay you back tomorrow." I didn't think twice. I sent $1,260 that night along with a text. "Next time, remind Dad to pay a bit earlier." Of course, I never saw a dime back. Then came the water bill, the gas stove repair, supplements for Dad's health issues. Each request accompanied by a reason that sounded so reasonable it would have felt heartless to say no. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just a little help here and there. But here and there quickly turned into everything. Electric bills, appliance repairs, gas money for Dad's car. Every transfer I made was met with silence, not even a thank you. Instead, there were more asks. "This month's a bit tight. Can you add a little more?" I tried to stay quiet, convincing myself that helping was the right thing to do. Families should stick together, shouldn't they? But every time I came home after weeks of grinding through work, I'd see Brandon lounging on the couch, feet propped up on the table, gaming endlessly. Mom would be in the kitchen making his favorite dish, and Dad would be recounting the same story about how my son won an art contest back in 5th grade. One day, standing in a convenience store, I opened my wallet to buy a gallon of milk and realized I didn't have enough money left. That moment hit me harder than anything else ever had. I wasn't just tired, I was drained, completely and utterly empty. All those years of sacrifice, all those sacrifices made in the name of love and duty, had left me hollow. And yet, the demands kept coming, relentless and unyielding. That Sunday afternoon it started to drizzle. Exhausted from a long weekend shift, I stopped at the store, grabbed a few bags of groceries, and drove nearly 40 minutes to my parents' house, just like I had done for 2 years straight. Walking into the kitchen, arms full of bags, salmon, vegetables, frozen meals, I set them down only to find Mom already there, not to greet me but to confront me. "Deanna," she said sharply, crossing her arms, "we need to talk. What you're sending every month, it's no longer enough." I froze. Not enough. What did she mean, not enough? Dad stepped in from the living room, his voice low and heavy, like he was delivering bad news. "You make good money. You live alone. Meanwhile, we're struggling every day. Doesn't that seem unfair to you?" I looked at the two people who raised me, now standing there trying to convince me that their comfort was my obligation. I held my voice steady though my chest felt like it might explode. All I ever do is take. Mom snapped, her lips pressed into that tight line I'd seen my whole life, the look she gave when she wanted to control everything through sheer indignation. If it's that much of a burden to you, she continued, each word cutting like a blade, then you can walk out that door and don't bother coming back. Time stopped. That sentence hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. If only she knew how much I wanted to leave. My steps were heavy but certain. No one followed. No one called my name. Just Brandon muttering something behind me, maybe so dramatic, or something like that. I walked out of that house empty-handed, hollow but with my back straight. The rain soaked my hair, my clothes, but for the first time I felt light. Like the weight I had carried for years wasn't duty, it was chains. And they had finally fallen. The first few weeks in my new apartment were strange, like stepping into a dream I wasn't sure I deserved. The silence was deafening at first, but it quickly became my sanctuary. For the first time in years, I woke up without an immediate sense of dread weighing on my chest. No frantic texts from Mom about unpaid bills. No guilt trips from Dad about how the family needs you. Just me, my coffee, and the soft hum of traffic outside my window. It felt surreal, almost fragile, as if this peace could shatter at any moment. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. My old comforter still smelled faintly of home, a mix of lavender detergent and something uniquely mine, but now it draped over a bed that belonged only to me. The walls were bare except for one small painting I'd bought at a flea market years ago, a landscape of rolling hills under a golden sky. Every morning, I opened the window to let in fresh air, watching the city slowly wake beneath the pale light of dawn. This tiny space, with its creaky wooden floors and low ceilings, felt more like home than the house I grew up in ever had. But freedom isn't free, they say, and neither is breaking away from a lifetime of obligation. At first, I reveled in the absence of demands. There were no reminders of Brandon lounging on the couch while I worked overtime. No memories of Mom cooking his favorite meals while ignoring my exhaustion. No lectures from Dad about how I should be grateful for everything they'd given me. Instead, there was just quiet. A quiet so profound it made me question whether I'd done the right thing. Was I being selfish? Heartless? Or was I finally doing what I needed to survive? Then, 6 months later, the storm returned. It started with a single text message late one evening. "Diana, we need to talk. Call us ASAP." I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. The words themselves weren't unusual. Mom often used phrases like this when she wanted something, but the timing felt ominous. I ignored it, telling myself it could wait until morning. But by the next day my phone was flooded with notifications. Calls from Mom, Dad, even Brandon. Each message carried the same tone, urgent, accusatory, desperate. "Diana, where are you? Why aren't you answering? This isn't a game. We're serious. If you cared about us, you'd pick up the phone." And then came the final blow. The bank called. "If you don't send money, the house will be foreclosed." My hands trembled as I held the phone. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room, to scream at them for having the audacity to demand anything after all these years. But another part, the part that had spent nearly a decade carrying their burdens, ached with doubt. What if they were telling the truth? What if the house really was in danger? Could I live with myself knowing I'd let them lose everything? I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the messages piling up on my screen. Memories flooded back unbidden. The countless times I'd tried to confront them, to explain that I couldn't keep giving endlessly. I remembered the look on Mom's face when I once dared to ask why Brandon never contributed financially. Her eyes had narrowed, lips pressed into that familiar tight line. "He's trying," she'd snapped. "You wouldn't understand because you've always been so lucky." Lucky. As if earning scholarships and working double shifts since high school was some kind of privilege rather than a necessity. And then there was Dad, always deflecting responsibility. "We're not asking for much," he'd said during one particularly heated argument. "Just help us out until things get better." Things never got better. They never would, not unless someone kept bailing them out. And for years that someone had been me. But not anymore. Not this time. As the hours passed, the messages grew more aggressive. Brandon chimed in with his usual mix of entitlement and disdain. "You think you're too good for us now? Running off to your fancy apartment while we struggle?" Mom's text turned pleading, then accusatory. "How can you abandon your own family? After everything we've done for you? Everything they'd done for me." As if raising me didn't come with its own set of obligations. As if love could be measured in favors and debts. I turned off my phone and placed it on the table, watching the blinking notification light fade into darkness. For 3 days I left it there, untouched. No calls, no texts, no guilt trips. Just silence. On the third evening I stepped out onto the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in hues of orange and pink. Below me the city buzzed with life. Cars honking, people laughing, the distant hum of music drifting through open windows. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cool breeze brush against my skin. For the first time in my life I felt truly free. But freedom came with questions. Had I made the right choice? Would losing the house destroy them? And if it did, would I ever forgive myself? It started with a letter. A thin, unassuming envelope slipped into the mailbox of my tiny apartment one rainy Tuesday morning. At first glance, it seemed harmless, a generic bank logo printed on the corner. But as I tore open the seal and scanned the contents, my heart sank. It was a warning notice addressed to my parents. Your mortgage payment is overdue by 8 months. Immediate action required to avoid foreclosure. My hands trembled as I read the words over and over, each line sinking deeper into my chest like a dull blade twisting in place. I had been sending money every month for nearly 2 years. Money that was supposed to keep the house from slipping away. How could this be happening? Was it possible they hadn't paid it all? Or worse, had they spent it on something else entirely? The thought made me nauseous. For weeks, I'd avoided confronting them, telling myself their problems weren't mine anymore. But now, staring at the cold, impersonal text of the bank's letter, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. If I didn't find out the truth, I would never stop wondering, and more importantly, I wouldn't know if I needed to step in again before it was too late. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering hesitantly over the keyboard. Logging into my parents' joint account felt invasive, almost sacrilegious, but I convinced myself it was necessary. After all, I was the one who had funded most of their expenses for years. Why shouldn't I check where my hard-earned dollars were going? What I found shattered whatever fragile trust one still held onto. Every single transfer I'd sent, meticulously documented in my finance notebook, was there recorded under dates matching my payments. But none of it went toward the mortgage. Instead, large withdrawals appeared sporadically. $500 here for home repairs, that never happened. $800 there, labeled vaguely as miscellaneous. And then there were the glaringly obvious charges. A designer watch purchased for Brandon, spa treatments for Mom, even a weekend getaway booked under Dad's name. My vision blurred as anger surged through me, hot and uncontrollable. They had lied to me. Not just once or twice, but systematically, deliberately. All those nights I skipped meals to save money, all those weekends I worked overtime while they lounged around, they had taken everything I gave and squandered it without remorse. I called the bank the next morning, disguising my voice slightly to sound detached and professional. "Hi, I'm calling about an account managed by my parents," I began, trying to steady my tone. "There seems to be some confusion regarding recent payments." The representative confirmed what I already suspected. No mortgage payments had been made in over 8 months. The funds I sent hadn't touched the loan balance, not even close. My stomach churned as she explained the growing penalties and interest stacking up against them. By the time we hung up, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. That afternoon, I dialed Dad's number. Each ring echoed painfully in my ears, stretching the seconds into eternity. When he finally answered, his voice was cautious, tinged with guilt. "Diana," he said slowly as if testing the waters. "We need to talk." "No," I interrupted sharply, surprising even myself with the venom in my voice. "You need to explain. Where did the money go?" He hesitated, then sighed heavily. "Look, sweetheart, things got complicated. Your mom thought, don't you dare blame Mom." I snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. "I sent $20,000 over 2 years specifically for the mortgage. That's not complicated. That's theft." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally he spoke again, his voice weak and defensive. "It wasn't intentional, okay? We thought maybe we could use some of it for other things. Just temporarily." "Temporarily?" I repeated, incredulous. 8 months isn't temporary, Dad. Buying Brandon a $1,200 watch isn't temporary. Taking vacations while I ate instant noodles for dinner isn't temporary. He tried to argue, stammering excuses about how stressful life had been, how they'd planned to pay it back eventually. But the more he talked, the angrier I became. His justifications sounded hollow, pathetic, like a child caught stealing candy and trying to rationalize it. Before he could finish, Mom grabbed the phone. Her voice hit me like a freight train, shrill and accusatory. "How dare you speak to your father like that? After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. You mean raising me so I could become your personal ATM? Is that what you call love? You ungrateful girl, she screamed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. Do you have any idea how much we sacrificed for you? And now, when we actually need help, you turn your back on us. For the first time in my life, I didn't let her manipulate me. I didn't crumble under her guilt trips or shrink away from her rage. Instead, I raised my voice, matching hers decibel for decibel. Help? You want to talk about help? I've been helping for 10 years, Mom. 10 years of working myself to exhaustion while Brandon played video games and you two acted like royalty. Do you even realize how much I've given up for you? How many times I put my dreams on hold because you needed another bailout? She faltered, her tirade breaking momentarily. Sensing weakness, I pressed on. I'm done, I declared firmly, my voice trembling with emotion but unwavering in resolve. I'm done being your safety net. From now on, whatever happens to that house, it's on you. Not me. There was a long pause, broken only by the sound of her ragged breathing. Then quietly, almost pleadingly, she whispered, "You'll regret this, Diana. Mark my words." I ended the call without responding, my hand shaking as I lowered the phone. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release. For the first time, I stood up to them. For the first time, I chose myself over their endless demands. The days that followed my confrontation with Mom and Dad felt like stepping into uncharted territory. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to their endless demands. My mornings became rituals of quiet joy, waking up early, brewing a pot of tea, and sitting on the balcony as the city slowly came alive beneath me. The air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt, a sharp contrast to the sterile silence of my old life back home. Each sip of tea tasted sweeter than the last, each sunrise brighter. These small pleasures weren't extravagant, but they were mine, a reminder that I was finally living for myself. But peace never lasts forever, does it? One evening, as I was scrolling through work emails, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a text from Dad. "Diana, we're running out of time. If you don't send money now, the house will go under. This is your fault." My heart sank. Not because I believed him, not anymore, but because the weight of their accusations still carried some power over me. They had always been masters at twisting guilt into weapons, and this message was no exception. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering above the keyboard, unsure whether to respond or delete it altogether. The next morning, another message arrived, this time from Mom. Her tone was desperate, almost pleading. "You're killing us, Diana. How can you sit there while everything we've built falls apart?" And then Brandon chimed in, his words dripping with venom. "You think you're better than us now? You'll regret this when it's too late." Their voices echoed in my head long after I turned off the phone. Memories flooded back. Memories of all the times I'd tried to explain how exhausted I was, how much I needed a break. But instead of understanding, they dismissed me, accused me of being selfish, ungrateful. "We gave you everything," Mom would say, her voice rising with indignation. "And now you turn your back on us?" I clenched my fists, trying to push those thoughts away. I knew what they were doing. They were manipulating me again, using guilt to pull me back into their chaos. But part of me couldn't help but wonder, what if they were right? What if losing the house really was my fault? Could I live with the knowledge that I let them lose everything? I spent hours pacing around the apartment, replaying every conversation, every argument, every moment of betrayal. I thought about the $20,000 I'd sent over 2 years. Money meant to save the house, only to be squandered on luxuries and excuses. I thought about the countless nights I worked overtime, skipping meals so I could send them more. And yet, here they were, blaming me for something they caused themselves. It was infuriating, humiliating, heartbreaking. But somewhere deep inside, amid the anger and self-doubt, I found clarity. Losing the house wasn't my burden to bear. It never had been. For years, I carried their problems on my shoulders, believing it was my duty to fix everything. But now I understood, it wasn't my responsibility to save people who refused to save themselves. That night, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I typed out a message, hesitated, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, after several drafts, I settled on something simple yet firm. "Mom, Dad, I know you're upset, but this isn't my fault. I sent money for the mortgage and you didn't use it. That's not my problem, it's yours. I'm done being your safety net. From now on, whatever happens to the house is on you. Not me. I've chosen to live for myself and I won't apologize for it." As soon as I hit send, a wave of relief washed over me. It wasn't just the act of writing the message, it was the realization that I meant every word. I wasn't the same person who left 6 months ago, the one who quietly endured abuse and neglect. I was stronger now. Stronger and freer. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my routine, refusing to dwell on their messages. I started journaling, documenting my thoughts and feelings in a notebook I kept by my bedside. Writing became my therapy, a way to process the pain and confusion without letting it consume me. I wrote about the guilt, the anger, the fear. But I also wrote about the moments of joy, the warmth of sunlight streaming through my windows, the laughter of strangers on the street below, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Slowly but surely I began to heal. The cracks in my armor started to mend, replaced by a newfound resilience. I realized that happiness didn't have to be grand or dramatic. It could be found in the smallest, simplest things. By the end of the week, I received one final message from Mom. Her tone was softer this time, almost resigned. "If you change your mind, it's not too late." I stared at the screen, tempted to reply. But instead, I closed the app and set my phone aside. I didn't owe them an explanation. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the balcony, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free, not just from my family's expectations, but from the chains of guilt and obligation that had bound me for so long. The morning light spilled over the city like liquid gold, painting the skyline in hues of amber and rose. I stood on the balcony, coffee mug in hand, watching the world wake up beneath me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally chosen myself. No more running back to fix what couldn't be fixed. No more sacrificing my dreams for people who refused to lift a finger. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't without guilt, but deep down, I knew I had done the right thing. At least, that's what I told myself every day when doubts crept in. Then one afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, a simple pasta dish with garlic bread, the phone rang. My heart sank before I even picked it up. The caller ID showed Mom's name, and I hesitated, wondering if I should answer. Finally, I pressed the green button and held the phone to my ear. "Diana," she said, her voice trembling, "the bank took the house." I froze, the spatula slipping from my hand and clattering onto the counter. For a moment, I thought I might cry for the memories tied to that place, for the years I spent trying to save it. But instead, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It was over. The house, the debt, the endless cycle of demands, it was all gone. "I'm sorry," I replied softly, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. "But you knew this was coming." Mom didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her tone was bitter, almost accusatory. "You could have stopped this, Diana. You chose not to help us." "No, Mom," I corrected firmly. "You chose not to help yourselves. I sent money for 2 years and you wasted it. That's not my fault, it's yours." There was silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of her ragged breathing. She didn't argue, didn't yell. Maybe she realized for the first time that I was right. Or maybe she just didn't have the energy to fight anymore. Either way, we ended the call shortly after, both of us drained. Later that evening, I met up with an old friend, Sarah, whom I hadn't seen in months. We grabbed coffee at a cozy cafe downtown, and as soon as we sat down, she noticed something different about me. "You seem lighter," she said, tilting her head curiously. "What's changed?" I hesitated, unsure where to begin. But then, slowly, I opened up, about the house, the money, the years of being treated like a personal ATM. Sarah listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. "Diana," she said gently, "you deserve credit for walking away. Not everyone has the strength to do that. Family is important, yes, but so are boundaries. You can't pour from an empty cup." Her words hit me like a revelation. All these years, I'd been so focused on fixing everyone else's problems that I forgot to take care of myself. Setting limits wasn't selfish, it was necessary. And yet, as empowering as that realization felt, part of me still wondered, was I too harsh? Could I have handled things differently? The next morning, I woke up early and stepped out onto the balcony again. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the city. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the cool breeze brush against my skin. Closing my eyes, I let the moment sink in, the quiet, the freedom, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. If you're reading this, I want to ask you something. Did I do the right thing? I chose to live for myself, to prioritize my happiness over the expectations of others. But sometimes late at night, I wonder if there's a price I haven't seen yet, a consequence waiting around the corner. Is it possible to break free without leaving scars behind? As I stood there, gazing at the horizon, I realized that maybe the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that I tried. that I dared to step out of the shadows and into the light, even if it meant losing pieces of myself along the way. And so, I smiled, not because everything was resolved but because I was learning to embrace the unknown. To trust that no matter what happens next, I'll face it with courage and grace. Because sometimes, moving forward means letting go of the past, and believing that you're worth more than the weight you've carried for so long.